For years, I have read and studied the Urantia Revelation quietly at home, but since the mid-1990s, I've been able to listen to the beautiful audios of each paper. They were first on cassette tapes and then CDs, but now are free to download to your computers, phones, or pads. I go to truthbook.com, but you can also go to urantia.org to download them. I actually enjoy and learn more as I listen to the papers, as I do simple tasks, or while driving, or while standing in line, or while sitting out in the garden to relax. The readers of the papers do a magnificent job, and often I can feel they're reading it like the authors wrote it, with passion, love, and sincerity. There are two quotes in the Revelation that particularly caused me to want to share this Harmony series with my brothers and sisters in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And these quotes are found in paper 195 of the Urantia Revelation.
What an awakening the world would experience if it could only see Jesus as he really lived on earth and know firsthand his life-giving teachings. Descriptive words of things beautiful cannot thrill like the sight thereof, neither can creedal words inspire men's souls like the experience of knowing the presence of God. But expectant faith will ever keep the hope door of man's soul open for the entrance of the eternal spiritual realities of the divine values of the worlds beyond.
And then the other quote that influenced my decision to make this Harmony series is found in the last paper, 196, titled The Faith of Jesus. To follow Jesus means to personally share his religious faith and to enter into the spirit of the Master's life of unselfish service for man. One of the most important things in human living is to find out what Jesus believed, to discover his ideals, and to strive for the achievement of his exalted life purpose. Of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it. The common people heard Jesus gladly, and they will again respond to the presentation of his sincere human life of consecrated religious motivation, if such truths shall again be proclaimed to the world. While listening to the beautiful General Conference of the Church in April of 2014, I thrilled to hear each message on my iPad and felt that they were all talking to me. It was wonderful. I was able to take my fingers and go closer to each speaker, and I could even see the moisture of tears in their eyes as they spoke of tender things. It was really so beautiful. And after conference, I realized that I don't just have faith that the church is true, as we often say, but I know it because of the truths of the Urantia Revelation has affirmed it to me. The thought began to come to me that I should have courage and share these videos that will help Latter-day Saints know there is harmony between the church and the Epochal Revelation. It is time for me to share with at least some of my brothers and sisters in the church, those who will be guided by the Spirit to come to my channel. The beautiful life and teachings of Jesus is spiritual music that will touch your soul and be confirmed by your spirit and the Spirit of truth. It is a gift of light and truth. You will still want to be active in the church with even more dedication and service. Let me now share with you some of the highlights of the life and teachings of Jesus. The fourth part of the Revelation is the magnificent account of the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. We learn about his parents and his birth, infancy, early and later childhood, his adolescent years and early manhood, and his adult life. It is so beautiful that I just want to tell you the whole story. In fact, I'm so enthusiastic about the fourth part of the Epochal Revelation that I was inspired to create an iMovie that I will invite you to view on my website. It is titled The Jesus Revelation Symphony. We read about his birth and the time they lived in Alexandria in Egypt. We learn about the return to Nazareth and his growing up from a child to youth to a young man. We are given the names and dates of his brothers and sisters' births and who they married. I was able to fill out a family group sheet. You members will smile at that. We read about his interests as he was growing up. We learn about details about the trip to Jerusalem when he became a son of the covenant. We learn what he questioned the rabbis about. We learn that his earthly father, Joseph, was killed in an accident when he was working in Sepphoris, and how Jesus took care of his mother and brothers and sisters from the time he was 14 years of age. It is such a tender story to read or hear about how Mary was pregnant when Joseph died, and so baby Ruth was born on April 17th, AD 9, and how, in quotes, affectionate and faithfully Jesus took care of little Ruth, end of quote. And he was an equally good father to all the other members of his family. He even formulated the prayer that we call the Lord's Prayer to teach his brothers and sisters to pray. We are told that he went on a 2-year mission before he began his ministry. You heard me right, and the celestial observers say they often thought it was the best 2 years. You can smile again. The Revelation tells us just how he conducted his missionary work, and I'm going to share a little bit of that.
At this time, the Roman Empire included all of southern Europe, Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, and northwest Africa, and its inhabitants embraced the citizens of every country of the Eastern Hemisphere. His desire to study and mingle with this cosmopolitan aggregation of Urantia mortals was the chief reason why Jesus consented to make this journey. Jesus learned much about men while in Rome, but the most valuable of all the manifold experiences of his 6-month sojourn in that city was his contact with and influence upon the religious leaders of the empire's capital. Before the end of the first week in Rome, Jesus had sought out and had made the acquaintance of the worthwhile leaders of the Cynics, the Stoics, and the mystery cults, in particular the Mithraic group. Whether or not it was apparent to Jesus that the Jews were going to reject his mission, he most certainly foresaw that his messengers were presently coming to Rome to proclaim the kingdom of heaven, and he therefore set about, in the most amazing manner, to prepare the way for the better and more certain reception of their message. He selected 5 of the leading Stoics, 11 of the Cynics, and 16 of the mystery cult leaders, and spent much of his spare time for almost 6 months in intimate association with these religious teachers. And this was his method of instruction. Never once did he attack their errors or even mention the flaws in their teachings. In each case, he would select the truth in what they taught, and then proceed so to embellish and illuminate this truth in their minds that in a very short time this enhancement of the truth effectively crowded out the associated error. And thus were these Jesus-taught men and women prepared for the subsequent recognition of additional and similar truths in the teachings of the early Christian missionaries. It was this early acceptance of the teachings of the gospel preachers which gave that powerful impetus to the rapid spread of Christianity in Rome and, from there, throughout the empire. The significance of this remarkable doing can the better be understood when we record the fact that out of this group of 32 Jesus-taught religious leaders in Rome, only 2 were unfruitful. The 30 became pivotal individuals in the establishment of Christianity in Rome, and certain of them also aided in turning the chief Mithraic temple into the first Christian church of that city. We who view human activities from behind the scenes and in the light of 19 centuries of time recognize just 3 factors of paramount value in the early setting of the stage for the rapid spread of Christianity throughout Europe, and they are: 1. The choosing and holding of Simon Peter as an apostle. 2. The talk in Jerusalem with Stephen, whose death led to the winning of Saul of Tarsus. 3. The preliminary preparation of these 30 Romans for the subsequent leadership of the new religion in Rome and throughout the empire. Through all their experiences, neither Stephen nor the 30 chosen ones ever realized that they had once talked with the man whose name became the subject of their religious teaching. Jesus' work in behalf of the original 32 was entirely personal. In his labors for these individuals, the scribe of Damascus never met more than 3 of them at one time, seldom more than 2, while most often he taught them singly. And he could do this great work of religious training because these men and women were not tradition-bound. They were not victims of a settled preconception as to all future religious developments. Many were the times in the years so soon to follow that Peter, Paul, and the other Christian teachers in Rome heard about this scribe of Damascus who had preceded them, and who had so obviously, and as they supposed unwittingly, prepared the way for their coming with the new gospel. Though Paul never really surmised the identity of this scribe of Damascus, he did, a short time before his death, because of the similarity of personal descriptions, reach the conclusion that the tent-maker of Antioch was also the scribe of Damascus. On one occasion, while preaching in Rome, Simon Peter, on listening to a description of the Damascus scribe, surmised that this individual might have been Jesus, but quickly dismissed the idea, knowing full well, so he thought, that the Master had never been in Rome. 3. Truth and faith. Nabon was a Greek Jew and foremost among the leaders of the chief mystery cult in Rome, the Mithraic. While this high priest of Mithraism held many conferences with the Damascus scribe, he was most permanently influenced by their discussion of truth and faith one evening. Nabon had thought to make a convert of Jesus, and had even suggested that he return to Palestine as a Mithraic teacher. He little realized that Jesus was preparing him to become one of the early converts to the gospel of the kingdom. Restated in modern phraseology, the substance of Jesus' teaching was: truth cannot be defined with words, only by living. Truth is always more than knowledge. Knowledge pertains to things observed, but truth transcends such purely material levels in that it consorts with wisdom and embraces such imponderables as human experience, even spiritual and living realities. Knowledge originates in science, wisdom in true philosophy, truth in the religious experience of spiritual living. Knowledge deals with facts, wisdom with relationships, truth with reality values. Man tends to crystallize science, formulate philosophy, and dogmatize truth because he is mentally lazy in adjusting to the progressive struggles of living, while he is also terribly afraid of the unknown. Natural man is slow to initiate changes in his habits of thinking and in his techniques of living. Revealed truth, personally discovered truth, is the supreme delight of the human soul. It is the joint creation of the material mind and the indwelling spirit. The eternal salvation of this truth-discerning and beauty-loving soul is assured by that hunger and thirst for goodness, which leads this mortal to develop a singleness of purpose to do the Father's will, to find God, and to become like Him. There is never conflict between true knowledge and truth. There may be conflict between knowledge and human beliefs, beliefs colored with prejudice, distorted by fear, and dominated by the dread of facing new facts of material discovery or spiritual progress. But truth can never become man's possession without the exercise of faith. This is true because man's thoughts, wisdom, ethics, and ideals will never rise higher than his faith, his sublime hope. And all such true faith is predicated on profound reflection, sincere self-criticism, and uncompromising moral consciousness. Faith is the inspiration of the spiritized creative imagination. Faith acts to release the superhuman activities of the divine spark, the immortal germ that lives within the mind of man, and which is the potential of eternal survival. Plants and animals survive in time by the technique of passing on from one generation to another identical particles of themselves. The human soul, personality of man, survives mortal death by identity association with this indwelling spark of divinity, which is immortal, and which functions to perpetuate the human personality upon a continuing and higher level of progressive universe existence. The concealed seed of the human soul is an immortal spirit. The second generation of the soul is the first of a succession of personality manifestations of spiritual and progressing existences, terminating only when this divine entity attains the source of its existence, the personal source of all existence, God, the Universal Father. Human life continues, survives, because it has a universe function, the task of finding God. The faith-activated soul of man cannot stop short of the attainment of this goal of destiny, and when it does once achieve this divine goal, it can never end, because it has become like God, eternal. Spiritual evolution is an experience of the increasing and voluntary choice of goodness, attended by an equal and progressive diminution of the possibility of evil. With the attainment of finality of choice for goodness and of completed capacity for truth appreciation, there comes into existence a perfection of beauty and holiness whose righteousness eternally inhibits the possibility of the emergence of even the concept of potential evil. Such a God-knowing soul casts no shadow of doubting evil when functioning on such a high spirit level of divine goodness. The presence of the Paradise Spirit in the mind of man constitutes the revelation promise and the faith pledge of an eternal existence of divine progression for every soul seeking to achieve identity with this immortal and indwelling spirit fragment of the Universal Father. Universe progress is characterized by increasing personality freedom because it is associated with the progressive attainment of higher and higher levels of self-understanding and consequent voluntary self-restraint. The attainment of perfection of spiritual self-restraint equals completeness of universe freedom and personal liberty. Faith fosters and maintains man's soul in the midst of the confusion of his early orientation in such a vast universe, whereas prayer becomes the great unifier of the various inspirations of the creative imagination and the faith urges of a soul trying to identify itself with the spirit ideals of the indwelling and associated divine presence. Nabon was greatly impressed by these words, as he was by each of his talks with Jesus. These truths continued to burn within his heart, and he was of great assistance to the later arriving preachers of Jesus' gospel.
We are told about John the Baptist and his special mission to prepare the way for Jesus' mission. It is a magnificent account that will help you understand even his prominent part in appearing to Joseph Smith. We learn of the marvelous vision that was given to Jesus at the time of his baptism. It was truly significant. We learn the details of the 40 days of preparation. The revelators point out he did not fast during that time. He returns and begins his ministry. We learn that he only chose 6 of the apostles and had each of the 6 select one more. The ordination ceremony was so beautiful and touching as they stood in a prayer circle. You will hear Jesus' words as he commissioned them to be his apostles. We learn the details of Jesus' training the apostles in the MTC, the Mission Training Center that Jesus established, and then his calling of the 70 evangelists. Jesus also organized a school of the prophets, and of course we know that Joseph Smith did the same. Then we read the amazing account of how Jesus called 12 women and set them apart to be evangelists. And later another 60 women were called to be in the group. I know that Joseph Smith was inspired to organize the Women's Relief Society, and he was following the pattern of Jesus. No wonder it's called a restored church. Many of Jesus' talks with the apostles are given. Many of his sermons are recorded in the Urantia Revelation. Each recording is precious and thrilling to read or listen to on audio. The last week in Jesus' earth experience is given on a day-to-day recording. The day he spent with Elijah Mark's son, John Mark, in the hills so he could commune with the Father, and how he talked to Mark about the importance of families. And we learn that it's the same Mark who recorded the book of Mark. We learn that God is willing to be with even a youth if the youth is sincere and truly desires to be with God. Just imagine young Joseph Smith, while reading from the book that Jesus' earthly brother wrote, the book of James, was so inspired when he read, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him." He was so inspired by the Spirit that he went out in the woods behind their home and knelt in humble prayer. Just imagine, he was about the same age of John Mark. And Jesus appeared to young Joseph, and probably the personalized spirit adjuster, who said, "This is my beloved son, hear him." And Jesus mistook that personage for the Father, but that's all right. It represents the Father. It is so incredible to me that the words of Jesus' own brother inspired young Joseph to ask God which church he should join, and he was told none of them, as their hearts were far from him. Thus, in a few years following his vision in the sacred grove, Joseph was instructed, and the restored church was organized on the earth in 1830. Remember that James was the first bishop in their first attempt to set up a group for the former day saints, and I can't help but see that the Epochal Revelation verifies Joseph Smith's experience in the sacred grove. Then the Revelation records what Jesus said to the apostles during his Last Supper with them, all his words in the farewell discourse, the final admonitions and warnings, and in Gethsemane all his tender prayer is recorded. And then we learn about the betrayal and arrest of Jesus, the crucifixion, and then the touching and marvelous resurrection, and the 19 appearances after the resurrection, more than we have been aware of before. I especially love knowing he appeared to his brother James, and to his earthly family, and to the women evangelists, and then to hear his talk to the brothers walking to Emmaus, and hear Jesus telling the brothers what Jesus' message was, as he was very familiar with it. It's just priceless, a pearl of great price, as they didn't know at that point that he was Jesus. And so he said he knew well the message of Jesus, and he gave them the essence of his teachings. It is so beautiful. Let me share that part with you also.
The Walk with Two Brothers. At Emmaus, about 7 miles west of Jerusalem, there lived two brothers, shepherds, who had spent the Passover week in Jerusalem, attending upon the sacrifices, ceremonials, and feasts. Cleopas, the elder, was a partial believer in Jesus. At least he had been cast out of the synagogue. His brother, Jacob, was not a believer, although he was much intrigued by what he had heard about the Master's teachings and works. On this Sunday afternoon, about 3 miles out of Jerusalem, and a few minutes before 5 o'clock, as these two brothers trudged along the road to Emmaus, they talked in great earnestness about Jesus, his teachings, work, and more especially concerning the rumors that his tomb was empty, and that certain of the women had talked with him. Cleopas was half a mind to believe these reports, but Jacob was insistent that the whole affair was probably a fraud. While they thus argued and debated as they made their way toward home, the Urantia manifestation of Jesus, his seventh appearance, came alongside them as they journeyed on. Cleopas had often heard Jesus teach, and had eaten with him at the homes of Jerusalem believers on several occasions, but he did not recognize the Master even when he spoke freely with them. After walking a short way with them, Jesus said, "What were the words you exchanged so earnestly as I came upon you?" And when Jesus had spoken, they stood still and viewed him with sad surprise. Said Cleopas, "Can it be that you sojourn in Jerusalem and know not the things which have recently happened?" Then asked the Master, "What things?" Cleopas replied, "If you do not know about these matters, you are the only one in Jerusalem who has not heard these rumors concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in word and in deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers delivered him up to the Romans and demanded that they crucify him. Now many of us had hoped that it was he who would deliver Israel from the yoke of the Gentiles, but that is not all. It is now the 3rd day since he was crucified, and certain women have this day amazed us by declaring that very early this morning they went to his tomb and found it empty. And these same women insist that they talked with this man. They maintain that he has risen from the dead. And when the women reported this to the men, 2 of his apostles ran to the tomb and likewise found it empty." And here Jacob interrupted his brother to say, "But they did not see Jesus." As they walked along, Jesus said to them, "How slow you are to comprehend the truth. When you tell me that it is about the teachings and work of this man that you have your discussions, then may I enlighten you, since I am more than familiar with these teachings. Do you not remember that this Jesus always taught that his kingdom was not of this world, and that all men, being the sons of God, should find liberty and freedom in the spiritual joy of the fellowship of the brotherhood of loving service in this new kingdom of the truth of the Heavenly Father's love? Do you not recall how this Son of Man proclaimed the salvation of God for all men, ministering to the sick and afflicted, and setting free those who were bound by fear and enslaved by evil? Do you not know that this man of Nazareth told his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, be delivered up to his enemies, who would put him to death, and that he would arise on the 3rd day? Have you not been told all this? And have you never read in the Scriptures concerning this day of salvation for Jew and Gentile, where it says that in him shall all the families of the earth be blessed, that he will hear the cry of the needy, and save the souls of the poor who seek him, that all nations shall call him blessed, that such a deliverer shall be as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land, that he will feed the flock like a true shepherd, gathering the lambs in his arms and tenderly carrying them in his bosom, that he will open the eyes of the spiritually blind, and bring the prisoners of despair out into full liberty and light, that all who sit in darkness shall see the great light of eternal salvation, that he will bind up the broken-hearted, proclaim liberty to the captives of sin, and open up the prison to those who are enslaved by fear and bound by evil, that he will comfort those who mourn, and bestow upon them the joy of salvation in the place of sorrow and heaviness, that he shall be the desire of all nations, and the everlasting joy of those who seek righteousness, that this Son of truth and righteousness shall rise upon the world with healing light and saving power, even that he will save his people from their sins, that he will really seek and save those who are lost, that he will not destroy the weak, but minister salvation to all who hunger and thirst for righteousness, that those who believe in him shall have eternal life, that he will pour out his Spirit upon all flesh, and that this Spirit of truth shall be in each believer a well of water, springing up into everlasting life. Did you not understand how great was the gospel of the kingdom which this man delivered to you? Do you not perceive how great a salvation has come upon you? By this time they had come near to the village where these brothers dwelt. Not a word had these 2 men spoken since Jesus began to teach them as they walked along the way. Soon they drew up in front of their humble dwelling place, and Jesus was about to take leave of them, going on down the road, but they constrained him to come in and abide with them. They insisted that it was near nightfall, and that he tarry with them. Finally, Jesus consented, and very soon after they went into the house, they sat down to eat. They gave him the bread to bless, and as he began to break and hand to them, their eyes were opened, and Cleopas recognized that their guest was the Master himself. And when he said, "It is the Master," the Urantia Jesus vanished from their sight. And then they said the one to the other, "No wonder our hearts burned within us as he spoke to us while we walked along the road, and while he opened up to our understanding the teachings of the Scriptures." They would not stop to eat. They had seen the Urantia Master, and they rushed from the house, hastening back to Jerusalem to spread the good news of the risen Savior. About 9 o'clock that evening, and just before the Master appeared to the 10, these two excited brothers broke in upon the apostles in the upper chamber, declaring that they had seen Jesus and talked with him. And they told all that Jesus had said to them, and how they had not discerned who he was until the time of the breaking of the bread.
We then learn about Pentecost and the bestowal of the Spirit of truth, which was given to each of them and which we all received when we are born. This Spirit of truth will cause us to feel close to Jesus and remember and understand his teachings, if we will open his program daily in our minds and hearts. We are told about the changes that took place in the message of the gospel after Jesus left. The Church of Jesus Christ calls it an apostasy, and the Epochal Revelation agrees it happened and tells us how important it is to come back to the true teachings of Jesus Christ. It ends with a magnificent paper on the faith of Jesus, where we are told we may appropriate the faith of Jesus if we will but ask. Ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and you shall find. We find out that is a law of the universe. Now that you have had a glimpse of this beautiful pearl of great price, let me read you again the beautiful description prepared by the Urantia Foundation. The first 3 sections of the book constitute an informing introduction, a universe backdrop for the enthralling drama of this human divine life of Jesus on our planet. The presentation, therefore, of the picture of this matchless life in its cosmic frame is rightly the climax, the fitting conclusion of the Urantia Revelation. Jesus' life and precepts in their original form, unencumbered by tradition and dogma, are by far the greatest possible help that mortal man can have in his age-long climb to paradise. The great hope of Urantia lies in the possibility of a new revelation of Jesus with a new and enlarged presentation of his saving message, which would spiritually unite in loving service the numerous families of his present-day professed followers. The time is ripe to witness the figurative resurrection of the human Jesus from his burial tomb amidst the theological traditions and the religious dogmas of 19 centuries. What a transcendent service if through this revelation the Son of Man could be recovered from the tomb of traditional theology and presented as the living Jesus to the church that bears his name and to all other religions. And that is on page 2090, paragraph 3. I know some think it is talking about the Christian church, but I can't help but think it's referring to the Church of Jesus Christ. Then let me remind you again, of all human knowledge, that which is of greatest value is to know the religious life of Jesus and how he lived it. That's on page 2090. Yes, the Epochal Revelation came outside of the church organization, any church organization. It could not have been otherwise. as it came for all people on the earth and all religions to discover when they are ready. The first printing of 10,000 copies was made in 1955, and over 250,000 copies of the Urantia Book have been sold since 1955, and I want to point out, all without mass publicity. The book has been published, and the Spirit guides people to discover it when they are ready.